My guest today is Dr. Stephen Christie. He's a physician specializing in oncologic, radiology, and body imaging. He's also an attorney and member of the Florida Bar. Dr. Christie lectures regularly on Catholic social issues, particularly marriage, family, and the dignity of life. He and his wife are the proud parents of 5 children. Steve has recently written a how-to manual, Speaking for the Unborn, 30-second pro-life rebuttals to pro-choice arguments. The manual presents some of the best rebuttals to every pro-choice argument made in support of abortion. Rebuttals based on science, the law, reason, social justice, and morality. Welcome to the show, Dr. Christie.
Hey, great to be with you. Thanks for having me on.
Oh, you're welcome. It's great to have you. When we were talking just a few minutes ago, you said that you actually started out as being pro-choice. Can you tell me a little bit about how you came from pro-choice to being pro-life?
Yeah, sure. I do a lot of live speaking, and usually when I'm introduced, people make a big fuss. They say, well, as a physician, that I know about science and embryology, and as a lawyer, I know about the law and the Constitution. As a father of 5, I know a bit about babies and pregnancy. And as a husband of over 25 years, I know that I've learned to appreciate the challenges women face balancing their family life with their work life and their motherhood. And people say that's why I'm qualified to speak on the issues of abortion, but that really is not what makes me most qualified. What I think makes me most qualified to speak on abortion is the fact that I spent the first 35 years of my life as a secular pro-choice liberal. So I know exactly what, why, and how the other side thinks about abortion. And having lived in the pro-choice and now the pro-life worlds, I have a fairly unique vantage point from which to address these issues. I like to say that when I was pro-choice, I learned the arguments, but when I became pro-life, I learned the truth. And this book and the accompanying website, speakingfortheunborn.org, are the truth. And that's what I've done. Now, and my conversion story, if you'd like to hear it. So I grew up an atheist in a secular progressive household. I went to a very pricey, fancy high school where it was known that if you were educated, if you were sophisticated, you were obviously pro-choice. It was so obvious we didn't actually ask why. And conversely, pro-lifers like you, well, you were clearly uneducated, you were non-thinking, you were backwards, and you were probably a Jesus freak. And even when I went through law school, I maintained being pro-choice, even in the beginning of medical school. And if you'd asked me why, I wouldn't have been able to articulate a reason at all. I might have thrown a ad hominem personal attack against you, or I might have thrown out a, my body, my choice for women, some sort of a cliche. But what changed me, in a word, is the truth. And in medical school, you actually study the facts about science, about life, and about embryology. And you learn that there's actually a definition of life, and it's a scientific definition. It's not a matter of philosophy. It's not a matter of religion. It's not a matter of politics. And as Shakespeare says, the truth will out. And what is alive is a purely scientific question that science has fully answered. It's spelled out in every embryology book, every biology textbook used in medical schools across the world. And it was actually a precise moment I could tell you about when a big change for me happened. I was in the anatomy lab one evening, and there was a room off to the side, this anteroom that was for storage. It was covered in dust. It had extra chairs and desks in it, and there was an old cabinet off to the side. And I peeked around the cabinet, and on shelves were jars with formaldehyde and babies in them, in different stages of development, embryos and fetuses. And clearly this bookcase had been discarded years ago. It must have been a display, 30 years previously. And I kept staring at these embryos and these fetuses, and I became horrified as to how irreverently they were being treated, discarded here on these dust-covered shelves. So the next day I found our embryology professor, who was a wonderful teacher. And I confessed to her how affected I was, and that I thought this was irreverent and wrong. And I said that these babies here, it was upsetting me how they were being left here. And it was fascinating. She became agitated. She became angry at me. She pointed at me and she said, "Those are not babies. They were never babies. They were never alive. Those are fetuses and embryos. They were never alive, never alive, never alive." And we both froze. And again, I thought of Shakespeare, "The lady doth protest too much." And that moment, I knew it for sure. Those were babies, and they had been alive. And interestingly, I knew she knew it too. And that was sort of the beginning of the major change in my life. I started an OB/GYN residency for 2 years, where you actually, when women miscarry and you hold embryos and fetuses in your hands. And again, there's no denying the truth when it's sitting in your hands.
Mm-hmm. I remember the first time that I saw an ultrasound of my first daughter. And I was like, I cannot believe that anybody would say that this is not a living thing looking at that ultrasound.
Yeah,
It was amazing. And today they have the 3D ones, like you have pictures on your
sure.
website that you look at those and it's like looking at a baby.
You know, on the website, we have these for download photographs and videos, so that when somebody says to you, you know, a 12-week-old baby, that's just a clump of cells. Well, we have arguments in the book that can explain eloquently why that's not just a clump of cells, but sometimes you let the baby speak for themselves. Just say, do you mind if I show you what a 12-week-old baby looks like? And show them a picture on your phone. And people, you know, you can see their faces change dramatically, their hearts opening, their minds changing when they realize, they say, oh my goodness, I didn't know. I didn't know. And it's exciting to be on the pro-life side, because it really is a winning side to be on. We rely on facts and truth and science, and that's just a winning combination. You know, the other side relies on cliches. It relies on rhetorical deception, these clump of cells things, or personal attacks. You know, I'm somehow a misogynist. I don't care about the health, safety, and well-being of my wife, and two of my children are women. So as though I don't care about them. So it's exciting. The pro-life side is a wonderful side to be on. What I've learned is the pro-choice side they really can't articulate their views. It's very rare that somebody can articulate their viewpoints. But I've learned, sadly, the pro-life side, we're also unable to articulate our views. We can say abortion is wrong, and that's great to know. But we have to know more than abortion being wrong to sustain a movement. We have to be able to articulate the very specific reasons why abortion is wrong. And that's why I've collected these arguments, edited them, compiled them, and put them in a user-friendly format you can bring into discussions or debates or discussions with family and friends. And I think that's really what's unique about this book, that it's very user-friendly.
What's the best way to use the manual or get started with the manual, Steve?
So before we even get into using the manual, in the beginning of the book, we talk about strategy. We talk about where we speak, talk about how we speak, and then we get to the what we speak, the actual words. And so the where, I think, is the strategy, I think, is really important for all of us. So the where we speak is, you know, the Ben Shapiros of the world go into stadiums and they fight, and it's fantastic, but that's not me, and maybe that's not you. Or you know, we all, if you're a legislator in Congress, that's great. You pass laws, that's wonderful. That's where you'll speak. And if you're an appellate court lawyer, that's wonderful. You can do that as well. But the role each of us plays, the vast majority of us, is in the everyday, ordinary circumstances of our lives, with our friends and our neighbors and our coworkers, one person at a time, opening hearts one at a time. And that brings us to how we speak. So that's the where we speak. The how we speak is we're always charitable. We're always speaking intelligently and persuasively. We are brief, keeping our arguments, as this book does, to 30 seconds each. That's about the attention span we all have. We're always mindful that about 25% of the women we're speaking with have already had an abortion. They deserve our compassion, not our condemnation. We've all made terrible mistakes in our lives. I've made terrible mistakes in my life. And we always focus on winning hearts. And people ask me, well, what does that mean? You know, winning, it sounds great, but what does that mean, winning hearts? And what I've come to learn is, when I'm debating or discussing with somebody, the words I want to hear, it's unrealistic to have somebody say, hey, Steve, wow, that was a great argument. I'm now pro-life. I mean, that's great if that happens, but that's not what happens. But generally what happens is, these are the words I like to hear. I'm hoping I hear, Steve, you know, that's really interesting. I never really thought about it that way before. That is the heart opening to the truth. And then, you know, it's easy from that point. So that's the goal. And if you think about it, I always think, you know, I grew up, as I told you, in an atheist household and a pro-choice household. So I think of my childhood friends or my family. If I'm speaking to my parents, what's the tone that I use? What's the attitude that I use with my closest friends? And if people know that you care about them, they'll start caring about the arguments that you and points you have to make. If they think you don't care about them, or you're just trying to stick them in the eye, or you're just trying to win arguments, you won't really get anywhere. The way we actually get to the words is I've organized every argument that I've ever heard in the pro-choice world is in the book, and we've put together, we've collected rebuttals to them, and we've given multiple options. So if somebody says to you, it's not alive, it's not a human, it's not a person, there are 6 or 7 arguments, rebuttals you can make, and you find the one that works for you. You don't have to memorize it word for word. You learn them as bullet points. I always say, practice with a debate partner. Get a friend, a family member, and make the arguments while holding up the book. Then switch positions and practice it. And that's what we've done. We've actually done even workshops with that. I'm trying to get that now into high schools, so that we can have kids that are armed to go out into the world, which would be an exciting thing. And I think that's sort of the next step, I'm hoping.
So you do have a website as well. Tell us a little bit about the website.
So the website speakingfortheunborn.org is actually everything you need to know so that you can go ahead and use the book. And the website is free. It has a 4-part teaching video series of everything you need to know about abortion, about Planned Parenthood, about the abortion procedures themselves. It covers embryology. It covers the constitutional law cases you should at least be familiar with, so that when you get into these discussions, you are educated and ready to go. You've done your homework. It also has, as we said before, it has photographs and videos so that you can download them to your phone, because again, sometimes the unborn can speak for themselves in a very powerful and persuasive way. And I think it's a great thing. I bought the rights to these photographs and these videos so that you can now download them and have them at your disposal on your phones. They're incredibly powerful. We have animations, not videos, but animations of the 5 major abortion procedures. So when someone says to you, abortion is just a benign procedure, it's nothing, it just ends a pregnancy, it's nothing. You can argue, and the book shows you how to argue. Or you could say, do you mind if I show you just a 90-second animation? And be careful who you show these to, obviously. But the animations are powerful. They're very disturbing. They're very accurate. They're put together by Dr. Anthony Levatino, a former abortionist. And they move hearts. There's videos all over the internet of people watching these videos and changing their minds on the spot. So again, the truth is a powerful tool. And so it's exciting to bring that. And the last thing I think strategically that I always say is we have to have courage. My wife is fairly well known in the pro-life movement. She has more courage than everybody combined. I'm not that way. I tend to want to write the book and then push the book out there and hide in my closet. Even, getting ready for this podcast, which you were kind enough to invite me on, I get a little nervous beforehand. I get a little sweaty beforehand, and my inclination is not to do it. But, 62 million children have died and can't speak. And so we have to have the courage to get out of our comfort zones and to compassionately, kindly, and persuasively speak on their behalf. And I think so we all have to find the courage. We don't have to go into stadiums or into courtrooms to do this, but with our friends and our families and our coworkers, we have to have the courage to do that.
As they say, a picture is worth 1,000 words. I don't know how many words a video is worth.
No, they're really unbelievable videos. I wish I could take credit for having made them, but they're unbelievable videos.
Yeah, they are. I've watched them. They're incredible videos. If it's a great way to just educate yourself, number one, and number two, it leads you into the manual. So once I've looked at the website, Steve, and looked at the 4-part series on the videos, now's the next step to go to the manual.
Yeah, so now you have the book with all your arguments. And what we did, we categorized them into 8 categories of arguments so that you can then organize your rebuttals. And we have the classic arguments to some of the more subtle and esoteric arguments. In the second edition that hopefully will be coming out fairly soon, we'll have some new arguments that we now have come across that people are throwing at us. Some of the arguments from the pro-life side are, and I don't want to be condescending, but they're really nonsense arguments. But we still have to have our articulate replies, so they're all there. Mm-hmm. Some of them are, very interesting discussions to have. I think the only pro-choice discussion I think that really merits a full discussion has to do with the autonomy of a woman and her personal bodily integrity, which I absolutely respect and understand. I want to have bodily integrity and autonomy as well, and I want that for all my children and my daughters and my wife as well. But the discussion always comes down to, it's the classic "my body, my choice." Right. And we have the discussions, and we can talk about the my body, and we can talk about the my choice. And so for the body, I always tell people, I try to agree where I can agree. And I say I fully support the right of a woman to do whatever she wants to her own body. I just don't believe she has the right to do what she wants to someone else's body. And a pregnancy always involves at least 2 bodies, sometimes more when you have twins or more. Mm-hmm. And the my choice, I always said, yeah, I agree that a woman has the right to choose, but it has to do with what we're talking about when we talk about choice. The choice she has, though, is not whether or not to kill her baby. It's the choice is whether or not to have sex in the first place. And when a woman chooses to have sex with the full knowledge that she may create a living human being inside her, then it's reasonable to expect that adult who knowingly took that risk to live with inconvenience, even significant inconvenience, if the only alternative is killing a child. I say that I'm very pro-choice as well, just with one less choice than you. I believe you can choose abstinence, you can choose motherhood, or you can choose adoption. I just don't believe you can choose to kill your child. So those are 3 arguments, for instance. I gave you all 3, but those are 3 arguments that we get. all the time. We get the arguments about alive or personhood or being human, and we can go through those. One of the ones that we talk a lot, I get a lot being a man, that you have no uterus, no opinion, and how dare you speak. And we have those responses as well. One of the things that we deal a lot with now is and I try to stay out of politics, but we have a president who says he's devoutly Catholic,
right,
and that he's very pro-life, but he endorses radical pro-abortion legislation. And so people say, we get this all the time, I'm pro-life, but what about, you shouldn't impose your beliefs on other people. And that's when we talk about a lot. And I simply say that the argument that we don't impose morality on other people is nonsense. We all believe in imposing morality, and we do it every single day on critical moral issues like rape or child abuse or murder or theft. We never rely on that individual's own personal moral code to best guide their actions. Not only do we declare that it's immoral, but we say if you rape or murder or steal, we're going to throw you in jail. And that's imposing morality, and we do it on every person in society every single day. So I would say, let's not pretend we're not imposing morality on everyone in society. We do it, every one of us, every day. And the idea that I'm personally pro-life, but who am I to impose that on other people? The classic argument has always been that when we feel there's a moral obligation for society, we feel we must impose that on every member of society. And we would make the argument, can you imagine me saying, I'm personally against slavery. I would never, ever have a slave. But, if you feel like you need a slave or two and you want to mistreat them, that's your decision. Who am I to impose my belief about slavery on you? You decide whether you want a couple of slaves or not. Obviously, immoral acts that are repugnant to a civilized society cannot be tolerated by anyone, and we impose that morality on every member of society. So those are some of the classic arguments that we talk about. That was, again, 2 different bullet arguments that we propose. You don't need to memorize them word for word, but when you practice them, you have them as sort of bullet points. And if you understand the logic behind the argument, then you can articulate it in the manner that you like.
Mm-hmm. Steve, there was a recent Supreme Court opinion. The draft was leaked.
Sure.
And this has caused a lot of uproar in different cities, amongst people talking to each other. We've seen a large increase on attacks on pro-life facilities, like
Absolutely.
emergency pregnancy centers, those type of things. What do you see happening?
So a lot of it's speculation and gossip, but we know the outcome. The outcome is, for instance, my wife is a radiologist in the pro-life movement who works for a pregnancy crisis center here in South Florida. It's in the national news. It was vandalized, graffitied with very violent rhetoric. We have the attempted assassination of a Supreme Court justice. Why this is the case, we can speculate. And the theories all have their own sense. If it was a liberal clerk who was trying to convert a Kavanaugh, for instance, to leave where he had signed on to, at least preliminarily, to the leaked opinion, where he might change sides, maybe he'd be pressured by people screaming and yelling at his front door, perhaps. Mm-hmm. The theory that it's a conservative leaker wanting to make sure that Kavanaugh, for instance, didn't bow to pressure, that he already has his name published on a paper that's been leaked, that he's afraid to bow to the pressure. A friend of mine has, I think, my best theory. That's the one I'm going with so far. Whenever you see trouble, always look for a man trying to impress a woman. So maybe that thing was left on a photocopy machine, and some guy said, look, you're not going to believe what I have here, until it looked like a big shot. So where it came from, we may never know. I'm hoping we finally get down to it. This week on Monday and today, 5 opinions from the Supreme Court were released. So nobody knows when this will actually be released. So I've watched live as those were being released, wondering if it's going to be the case. My guess is that they're going to wait till the very last day of June before they break for their summer recess. And that's what they usually do with big cases. And that would show the leaker that that they're not winning anything, that nothing has changed, even though the safety of the justices is at risk, the conservative justices right now, absolutely, and it's been proven right now. So we'll see where this goes. I have my fingers crossed that this is the end of Roe. It looks like, by all accounts, it should be. We don't know for sure until this happens. If it's the end of Roe, we always need to point out this is a couple of facts. One, this does not make abortion illegal.
No.
It just means it's no longer federally protected. So it goes to the states. We have about 25 or so states that are going to significantly restrict or prohibit abortion. We have maybe 14 or 15 that are going to essentially codify abortion until birth. And we have maybe 10 in the unknown realm where it's going to go. And now actually where the real work of the pro-life movement comes into play. This is where we really have to, each state is going to have to, we're going to be voting on our legislators that are going to be changing the law. So this is where we really need to, the grassroots movement needs to be working. We need to get out, roll up our sleeves. And this is where the book is really useful. In the beginning, when this book came out, I was a little embarrassed pushing a book. Oh my goodness, I'm selling, I'm a salesman. I always say two things. One, it doesn't bother me because the cause is wonderful. And two, I always declare, and this is a fact, I don't personally take and I'm lucky because I have a different profession. I won't take a penny from any sale of the book. The publisher gets paid, the rest gets donated to pro-life causes. So I have no problems. Go to Amazon.com, Speaking for the Unborn, and the website, you can reach me if you need to reach me, or you can buy the book through the website, or see all the resources that are on it, speakingfortheunborn.org.
Thank you, Steve. What else would you like to share with the regular Catholic guys out there?
There's lots of issues. Because this is a religious show, I feel comfortable speaking on religious issues. I'm a wacky Catholic. I was raised an atheist. I love my Catholic faith. It informs every single thing that I do. I'm a daily mass wacko. I love my faith. It's changed my whole world. But interestingly, I make the argument in the book and in my lectures, I don't bring the language of my faith into my pro-life apostolate. Now, if I'm having a conversation with a religious person, especially a Catholic person, I'll absolutely bring my faith in. We could talk about the catechism and where we stand on the issues of abortion. But the vast majority of pro-choice people are secular people who don't understand religion. And they think, as I said before, that if you're religious, you're unthinking, you're brainwashed, and you're a bit of a strange person. So if you're discussing abortion, you've made 8 fantastic non-religious arguments defending the rights of the unborn, and then you accidentally say the word God or sanctity or the Bible, you'll see the face of the person you're discussing with change dramatically, and you can read their mind. They're saying something like this: oh, Steve, sorry, I hadn't realized you're a freak. Have a nice day. So your 8 wonderful non-religious arguments you made just went out the window. So I say using religious arguments almost all the time is handing your non-religious opponent a club with which to beat you over the head. So we have so many powerful non-religious arguments. I say we stick to them. And so that's not to say that I don't bring my faith directly into my apostolate, pro-life apostolate, which I do, but I don't use the language. In fact, there's a dear friend of mine, a priest. He has a cute formula. I don't know where he got it, but it points out. He said, Steve, he says, you, like many people, says, you rush out into the crowd. You rush out to make your arguments. He says, that's not what Catholic men do. Mm-hmm. He says, we start with prayer. So be guided by the Holy Spirit. So spend, he says, 65% of your time in prayer. So that's his first formula, 65% of prayer. He says, then one of the classic things we have in our faith is he says, make a sacrifice on behalf of the person you're going to speak with. He says, so, my wife always says, offer it up, Steve, offer it up. And this is old world Catholicism. So if I'm going to go speak to my childhood friend on this issue, who's fiercely secular and fiercely pro-choice, I might not put I might not put sugar in my coffee that day. I'm making a personal sacrifice. It's an offer to God as a prayer for my friend. And my friend says, that's 25%. So start with a prayer, then you have your sacrifice, and then once all that's done, then rush out into the world and do all this book. He said, but don't think your book is your first weapon, because as men and women of faith in our Christian and Catholic faith, we have powerful tools at our disposal before we ever get to these written books, So pray, have sacrifices, then rush out, be prepared with the website. Then you have your book and your words for you to effect this wonderful change with people who are dying to know the truth if they can be exposed to it. But don't use the language of faith unless you really find it appropriate. Because if you start talking about sanctity of life and sin and God to your average pro-choice person, they're going to dismiss everything else you say as well.
Mm-hmm. Sounds like you know that from experience.
Unfortunately, I do. I learned everything. Talk to my wife. I've learned every lesson in life the hard way.
Thank you, Steve. We will put the links to the website and also the link to get the book on the show notes. And we'll also put information on how to contact you for your speaking.
Fantastic.